You probably think you know the story of Cinderella. A beautiful girl, a cruel stepmother, a magical fairy godmother, a glass slipper, and a prince who finds her, and they live happily ever after. But what if I told you that isn't the original story, not even close? The Cinderella story is much older than Disney. Versions of it have been told for hundreds, even thousands of years across completely different cultures. And some of them are far stranger and far darker than anything you saw in a cartoon. To find where Cinderella truly begins, we have to go back roughly 2,000 years to ancient Egypt. The story is about a young woman named Rhodopis. According to the tale, Rhodopis was not Egyptian by birth. She had been enslaved and brought to Egypt, where she worked as a servant. One day, while she was bathing in a river, an eagle swooped down, snatched one of her sandals, and carried it away. The eagle flew for miles until it reached the city of Memphis, where it dropped the sandal directly into the lap of the Egyptian pharaoh. The pharaoh was captivated by the sandal's beauty and became determined to find the woman it belonged to. He sent his men across Egypt searching. Eventually they found Rhodopis, and just like Cinderella, her life changed completely. The pharaoh married her, and Rhodopis went from servant to queen. No pumpkin carriage, no fairy godmother, just an eagle, a sandal, and a king's obsession with finding its owner. This version, recorded by the Greek historian Strabo, is considered by many scholars to be the earliest known Cinderella story ever written down. Nearly 1,000 years later, a strikingly similar story appears, this time in China. Her name is Ye Xian. In this version, Ye Xian's mother has died, and her father has also passed away, leaving her under the control of a cruel stepmother. Forced into servitude, Ye Xian's only comfort is a magical fish that lives in a pond near her home. When her stepmother discovers the fish, she kills it out of jealousy. But an old man appears and tells Ye Xian that the fish's bones hold magic. Using the bones, Ye Xian is able to summon beautiful clothing, and in some versions, a pair of tiny golden slippers. She attends a festival in secret, but in her rush to leave before being recognized, she loses one of her slippers. The slipper eventually makes its way to a powerful king, who becomes determined to find the woman whose foot fits it perfectly. Sound familiar? This story, recorded in a Chinese text, believed to date back over 1,000 years, predates the European versions most people are familiar with by centuries. By the time Cinderella reaches Europe, the story takes an even harsher turn. In the Brothers Grimm version, the one that predates Disney by over a century, Cinderella's stepsisters are far more desperate to win the prince than in the version most people know. When the golden slipper is brought to their house, one stepsister cuts off part of her heel to force her foot to fit. Another cuts off part of her toes. Blood fills the shoe both times, and it's only when the prince notices the blood that he realizes he's been deceived. There's no glass slipper conveniently shattering. There's no fairy godmother waving a wand. In this version, Cinderella's help comes not from magic, but from birds, specifically doves that assist her throughout the story, and in a much darker final twist, peck out the stepsister's eyes as punishment at Cinderella's wedding. This wasn't an obscure, forgotten version. For much of the 1800s and 1900s, this darker telling was one of the most widely read versions of the story across Europe. If the earliest versions had eagles, magic fish bones, and self-mutilating stepsisters, where did the pumpkin carriage and fairy godmother actually come from? That version comes from Charles Perrault, a French writer who published his telling of Cinderella in 1697. Perrault is the one who introduced the pumpkin turning into a carriage, mice becoming horses, and a fairy godmother granting the transformation. He's also the one who specifically made the slipper glass rather than gold, fur, or fabric. A detail some historians believe may have come from a translation choice or a deliberate stylistic decision, since glass slippers are far more magical and far less practical than any earlier version of the story. It was Perrault's version, softened, elegant, and magical, that eventually became the foundation for the story most of the world recognizes today, and later, the version Disney would adapt in 1955. Here's what's genuinely strange about all of this. These versions of Cinderella emerged in Egypt, China, and Europe, separated by thousands of miles, and in some cases, over 1,000 years, with no evidence the storytellers ever had contact with each other. And yet the core structure keeps repeating: a mistreated young woman, an item that identifies her, a shoe, a slipper, a sandal, and a powerful figure who searches for her because of it. Folklorists have a name for this pattern. They classify it as tale type 510A, a story structure found in over 500 documented versions across dozens of cultures worldwide. Some researchers believe stories like this reflect something close to universal human experience: injustice, hidden worth, and the hope that eventually someone will recognize who you really are. Cinderella, in other words, may not be one story at all. She might be an idea so old and so human that it simply kept getting reborn in Egypt, in China, in the forests of Germany, and eventually in a cartoon mouse's animation studio in California. So the next time you watch Cinderella lose her slipper at midnight, remember that somewhere in ancient Egypt, an eagle once did the exact same thing with a sandal. Remember that in China, it wasn't a fairy godmother who helped a girl named Ye Xian. It was the bones of a fish she loved. And remember that for centuries, the story didn't end with happily ever after, quite so gently. The Cinderella we know today is just one version, one retelling in a story that's been told, reshaped, and passed down for over 2,000 years. One shoe, dozens of cultures, thousands of years, and somehow the story never stopped being told.